I cleaned houses for 30 years to put my kids through college. Then they said I wasn't good enough for their success. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But this ain't about revenge. This is about reclaiming what's mine. My dignity, my story, my place in my own damn family. If you're watching this, subscribe to this channel now and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Because every woman who's ever been made invisible needs to hear this story. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, smoothing down the navy dress I'd saved 3 months to buy. The silver earrings, my mama's, caught the light as I tilted my head. Not bad for 68 years on this earth. Not bad at all. You sure you want to go, Eleanor? Bernadette's voice crackled through my phone speaker. After what happened last time? It's my grandson's graduation dinner. My voice was steady, but my hands betrayed me, trembling as I fastened my pearls. I'm gonna be there. Hold your head high. Then, don't let them see you sweat. Easy for her to say. Bernadette hadn't spent 30 years being erased. The restaurant was one of those downtown Chicago places with crystal everything and waiters who looked at you sideways if your shoes weren't shiny enough. I spotted Marcus first, my oldest, the surgeon with hands I once bandaged after playground falls. Now he used those hands to wave me toward a table in the far corner, away from the family celebration. "Mother, you're late," he said without looking at me, checking his Rolex instead. No hug, no smile. His wife, Kathleen, was worse. "Eleanor, we've already ordered appetizers. We weren't sure you'd make it." They knew damn well I'd make it. I hadn't missed a single milestone in 45 years, not even when I was working double shifts. When I tried to tell a story about Marcus's own graduation, Kathleen cut me off. "We're discussing Trey's fellowship options," as if I couldn't possibly contribute to a conversation about education. Me, who'd put 3 children through college on a housekeeper's salary. Actually, I opened my purse. I brought a photo of when Marcus, Mom. His voice sliced through the air. "Nobody wants to hear those old stories. We're not in the South Side now." The table went quiet. My grandson glanced at his phone. Instead, Marcus sipped his wine. Something cold and hard formed in my chest. I remembered myself at 38, scrubbing toilets during the day, changing bedpans at night, coming home to help with homework, my fingers raw from cleaning chemicals, checking the mailbox daily for word from James, who disappeared without a trace, leaving me with 3 children and a mountain of bills. "Eleanor, could you watch your purse? It's blocking the server," Kathleen said. I moved my purse, the one containing the key to my safety deposit box at South Chicago Community Bank, the box where I'd kept every important document since James left, a habit born from necessity when I suddenly became responsible for everything. I watched them laugh and talk, these strangers who shared my blood. I smiled and nodded in all the right places, but inside, something was shifting. A crack spreading in the foundation of who I thought I was. A memory flashed. James walking out the door with his suitcase, me begging him to stay, the children watching from the stairs. "I need more than this," he'd said, gesturing around our modest home. "More than you." I looked at my son, who couldn't meet my eyes, and realized that somewhere along the way, he'd started believing the same thing. The Atlanta airport was a maze of people rushing past me like I was invisible, just like Vanessa, my middle child, my only daughter, who'd told me to take a cab to her condo because she was swamped with meetings. $200 later, I was standing outside her glass and steel high-rise, my small suitcase at my feet. "Mom, you're early," she said, when she finally opened the door, still typing on her phone. Her apartment smelled of nothing. No food, no perfume, just expensive emptiness. Flight got in on time for once. I hugged her. She patted my back twice, the way you might touch a stranger. That night, she had colleagues over for drinks. I spent an hour making my special crab dip, the one she used to beg for as a child. "Who's this?" asked a man in an expensive suit, nodding toward me as I brought out the appetizers. Vanessa's smile never faltered. "Oh, this is Eleanor, a family friend visiting from Chicago." Family friend. Like I hadn't carried her for 9 months and worked 18-hour days to put her through business school. Later, I heard her on the phone in the guest room, my room for the week. "Yes, she's still here," Vanessa whispered harshly. 3 more days. I can't take much more of her stories about cleaning houses and working at that nursing home. It's depressing." I stood there, my hand frozen on the doorknob, feeling like I'd been slapped. That night, Looking for an extra blanket in her closet, I found a box labeled Dad. Inside were letters, dozens of them, dating back to when Vanessa was in high school. Letters from James, the man who'd walked out on us when she was 12. "Your mother means well," one letter read. "But she'll never understand ambition like ours. I'm working to build something that will make you proud, Princess." My hands shook as I read letter after letter, all sent during years when I was working night shifts. Years when I thought James had disappeared completely. The next week I visited Anthony in Boston. My youngest, the writer, the one who still called regularly, who seemed to remember where he came from. "Mom, you're looking good," he said, hugging me tight in his faculty office at the university. Books lined the walls, including his own memoir, the one I'd never quite finished reading. "Tell me about the new book," I said. He leaned forward, eyes bright. "It's about overcoming obstacles, growing up with an absent mother who was always working, finding my own path." The words hit like body blows. "Absent? Anthony, I worked those hours so you could eat, so you could go to college." He had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Look, it's not personal, Mom. It's just how I remember it. And readers connect with stories of overcoming adversity." Later, in my hotel room, I found his interview in a literary magazine. They asked who inspired him. "My father," he'd answered. "A complicated man who wasn't always physically present, but who taught me to dream beyond my circumstances. This book is dedicated to him, the man who showed me what was possible." 3 children, 3 betrayals, each one cutting in its own way. I called Bernadette that night, my voice breaking as I told her everything. "Eleanor Washington," she said firmly. "Those children have forgotten who raised them. Maybe it's time to remind them." The hospital ceiling had a water stain shaped like Florida. I'd been staring at it for 3 days, ever since the stroke. "Small one," the doctors said. A warning. "Mother, we need to discuss your living situation." Marcus stood at the foot of my bed, arms crossed. He'd arrived yesterday, 2 days after I was admitted. Vanessa was by the window, typing on her phone. "There's a very nice assisted living facility near me in Atlanta." "I don't need assisted living," I said, my words slightly slurred. "The doctor said I'll recover fully." "You're being stubborn," Marcus sighed. As usual, they thought I was asleep when they talked in the hallway later. "She's always been difficult," Vanessa whispered. "Remember how she'd never let us go to sleepovers because she needed help around the house? We need to be practical," Marcus replied. "She can't live alone anymore, and none of us have room." Room. In their massive houses with guest bedrooms that stood empty, I closed my eyes against the burning feeling. "Eleanor Washington, you look a mess." Bernadette bustled in the next morning, Jamaican accent stronger when she was upset. "These children of yours couldn't even bring you decent nightclothes?" She'd been my friend for 25 years, since we cleaned houses in the same neighborhood. Now she was the only one who saw me, really saw me. "Look what I found," she said, unfolding a newspaper. "Your ex-husband making a fool of himself again." There was James in a tuxedo at some charity gala. The caption called him a self-made construction magnate and philanthropist who raised 3 exceptional children as a single father following a difficult separation. Single father? I sat up so fast my head spun. That man walked out when Marcus was 15 and never looked back. Bernadette squeezed my hand. "We both know the truth." But the truth was starting to blur around the edges. The article said James had built his construction company with his own hands, starting from nothing. A memory surfaced. James, before he left, working as an accountant for a construction company. Papers he'd asked me to sign. Just routine, he'd said, for taxes. I'd signed them all, trusting him completely. When I was discharged, Vanessa reluctantly took me to her condo. "Just until you're back on your feet, Mom." While she was at work, I started thinking about the documents in my safety deposit box back in Chicago. After my mother died in 1998, when I was 41, I'd become almost obsessive about keeping records. It started as practical necessity. A single mother with 3 kids needed proof of every payment, every transaction. But over time, it became my armor against a world that wanted to make me disappear. Every pay stub, every receipt, every school form, I'd kept it all, organized in color-coded folders by year, then stored in acid-free boxes. The most important documents went into the safety deposit box I'd maintained for decades. I called the bank in Chicago. "I need to access my box." "Of course, Mrs. Washington. We'll be here." That meant a trip back home. Back to the evidence of a life spent ensuring my children would never go without. Evidence that might now be my only weapon against erasure. I wasn't invited to Marcus's 45th birthday gala. Found out about it when Anthony called to ask if I was going. "Your brother didn't invite me," I said. Silence on the line. Mom, that's not right. I'll talk to him." "Don't bother." Pride straightened my spine. "I'm going anyway." The valet looked confused when my taxi dropped me off at the country club. Inside, a young woman with a clipboard stopped me. "Excuse me, service entrance is around back." I wore my best dress, royal blue with silver threading, my mother's earrings. Still, she assumed I was the help. "I'm Dr. Washington's mother," I said. Her eyes widened. "Oh, I'm so sorry, Mrs. Washington. Please, go in." The ballroom sparkled with crystal and money. I spotted Marcus immediately, holding court near a giant ice sculpture. Beside him stood a tall man in an expensive suit. James, 30 years older, but unmistakable. Silver at his temples now, but the same confident stance. The same smile that once made my knees weak. I froze, watching as Marcus clinked a spoon against his champagne glass. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight," he said. "Especially my father, who has been the rock of this family. Dad, your sacrifices made my success possible. You gave up everything to ensure we had the opportunities you never had." Applause filled the room. James nodded modestly, a hand on our son's shoulder. I moved forward without thinking. "That's not true." The words weren't loud, but heads turned. Marcus's smile became fixed. "Mother, I didn't realize you were coming." "Apparently not." I looked directly at James. "Your father didn't sacrifice anything. He left when you were 15. I'm the one who worked 2 jobs to put you through school." The room went silent. Marcus's face darkened. "Mom, you're confused. Dad has always supported us." "Security," he murmured to someone beside him. "Please escort my mother out. She's not well." Strong hands gripped my elbows. I didn't resist as they led me toward the exit, my head high despite the whispers. In the parking lot, a familiar voice called my name. "Eleanor." James stood there, silver hair gleaming under the lights, still handsome, still able to make my heart race, with anger now, not love. "You look well," he said, as if we'd seen each other yesterday. "No thanks to you." He shook his head sadly. "Always bitter. That's why I had to step in with the kids, Eleanor. You always knew you didn't have what it takes to help them reach their potential." A flash of memory, James appearing at Marcus's college graduation. Me, unable to attend because I was working a double shift at the nursing home. The beginnings of the distance in my son's eyes when he returned. Vanessa's sudden resistance to my calls during her sophomore year. The new clothes she came home with. The dismissive tone. Anthony's writing scholarship that Dad helped me get. All those years I thought James was completely absent. He'd been there, selectively, rewriting our history one visit at a time. "You stole more than money," I said quietly. "You stole my children." His smile never faltered. "I simply showed them a better way. Now if you'll excuse me, I have a party to get back to. My son is waiting." I watched him walk away, back straight, not a care in the world. Something shifted inside me, a dam breaking, releasing years of hurt and confusion. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about truth, and it was long overdue. "First stop, the bank," I told Bernadette the morning after I returned to Chicago. "I need my papers." The safety deposit box I'd maintained since 1994 was my fortress. When James left, I'd become obsessive about documentation, a habit born from necessity when bill collectors started calling. Every important paper went into this box: birth certificates, deeds, insurance policies, things I couldn't afford to lose when I moved between cramped apartments, following more affordable rent. The bank manager smiled with recognition. "Mrs. Washington, it's been a while." Inside the private room, I opened the metal box and began sifting through 3 decades of meticulous record-keeping. My system was simple but effective. Legal documents in blue folders, financial in green, educational in red. Each labeled with dates and contents, cross-referenced in a ledger I updated religiously. Birth certificates, tax returns, medical records, I muttered, sorting through the papers on Bernadette's dining table later. Mortgage statements, tuition receipts. "Girl, I've never seen so much paper in my life," Bernadette said, bringing me fresh coffee. "You've been saving all this since James left?" "When you're poor, documentation is the only power you have," I explained. Every time some office tried to claim I hadn't paid something, or a school said my kids weren't eligible for a program, I'd pull out my receipts. Had to train myself to keep everything. "You need to meet my niece Letitia," Bernadette said. "She works for that law firm downtown, handling financial fraud cases. Smart as a whip." Letitia was indeed smart, and furious when I showed her the evidence I'd gathered. "This is textbook financial abuse, Ms. Washington," she said, examining my mother's insurance policy. "And the fact that you've kept such meticulous records is extraordinary." She connected me with a pro bono attorney specializing in elder financial abuse. Mr. Daniels didn't mince words. "Many of these incidents are beyond the statute of limitations, Mrs. Washington, but there's a pattern here that might still be actionable. Some institutions might not have records going back 30 years, he warned, but we can request what's available, and your personal documentation will be crucial." While the legal wheels turned slowly, I found myself drawn to the community center near Bernadette's apartment. They offered writing classes twice a week. "I can't write," I protested when Bernadette suggested I go. "Eleanor Washington, I've seen your letters to the school board when they tried to cut Anthony's gifted program. You can write just fine." The first class, I sat in the back, silent and uncertain. The instructor, Miss Corinne, had us write about a moment that changed our lives. My pencil hovered over the blank page. So many moments to choose from. "I found my voice at 68, I finally wrote. After a lifetime of being silenced, week by week my confidence grew. I wrote about cleaning houses with raw hands, about watching my children graduate from colleges I'd never had the chance to attend, about discovering betrayal in a box of old letters. Meanwhile, Mr. Daniels made progress. Banking records showed James had indeed used my mother's insurance money to start his construction company. The bank had kept these particular records because of an audit flag, something about irregular transfers that had raised questions at the time. "He built his empire on your back, Mrs. Washington," Mr. Daniels said, "and I believe we can prove at least the more recent instances of fraud." Most surprising were the university records. Financial aid offices maintain archives longer than most institutions. A blessing in my case. They still had my letters attached to tuition payments, heartfelt notes about my pride in my children, my hopes for their futures. "Your children never saw these," Mr. Daniels explained gently. "The payments went to accounts controlled by your ex-husband. He presented himself as the source of their financial support." I sat very still, absorbing this final betrayal. "What do you want from this, Mrs. Washington?" Mr. Daniels asked. "Financial compensation? An apology?" I thought about James at that party, his hand on our son's shoulder, about decades of erased contribution, about my children believing I'd been nothing but a struggling housekeeper who couldn't understand their ambitions. "I want the truth," I said finally. "Nothing more, nothing less." "So you're telling me James Washington isn't the saint everyone thinks he is?" Diana leaned forward, her reporter's notebook open, eyes bright with interest. I hadn't intended to tell my story publicly, but when this young journalist came to the community center researching Father of the Year nominees and mentioned James's name, something clicked. "I'm saying there's more to the story," I replied cautiously. We met 3 more times before I showed her any documentation. Diana was thorough, respectful, and most importantly, she listened. "This isn't just about your ex-husband," she said during our 4th meeting. "It's about all the women whose contributions get erased, the invisible women who hold everything together." While Diana researched, I began my own quiet campaign of truth. To Anthony's publisher, I sent a photograph from my personal album, me at our kitchen table, helping Anthony with homework at midnight after my shift, my uniform still on. My neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, had taken it, saying, "Girl, you need to document this sacrifice." I'd kept it in my special Proof I Was There album, pictures I'd collected to combat James's erasure before I even knew that's what I was doing. On the back, I wrote simply, "Another perspective for your author's story." To the medical foundation where Marcus served as board member, I sent copies of tuition receipts and the letters I'd written to the financial aid office, pleading for additional assistance so my son could attend medical school. To Vanessa's mentor, the woman she credited with seeing her potential when no one else did, I sent bank statements showing regular deposits to Vanessa's account during college, not from James's generous allowance, but from my second job at the nursing home. For proof of Vanessa's computer that I'd paid for, a particular point of pride for James, I didn't have the original receipt. But I did have my detailed expense journal from that period, showing extra cleaning jobs I'd taken specifically for V's computer, along with a bank withdrawal matching the exact amount the day before the purchase. Each envelope contained no accusations, just documentation with a simple note, "For a complete history." The responses trickled in slowly. A puzzled email from Anthony's editor, a phone call from the foundation director asking for clarification, a lunch invitation from Vanessa's mentor. Then came the text from Vanessa. "Mom, Judith says you sent her some old bank statements. What's going on?" I didn't respond. For once, I wanted my evidence to speak for itself. "Your strategy is unusual," Mr. Daniels said during our weekly meeting. "I'm not trying to destroy anyone," I explained. "I just want the record straight." Diana's investigation deepened. She discovered James had leveraged his false narrative, the dedicated single father building a business while raising 3 successful children, to secure government contracts specifically reserved for disadvantaged business enterprises. "He literally built his company on a lie," Diana said, showing me the documentation, "and used it to access minority business funds he wasn't entitled to." When Anthony called, his voice was different, subdued. "Mom, my editor showed me that photo from when I was working on my science project, the volcano," I said. "You were determined to make real lava. You stayed up all night helping me, didn't you? Even though you had work the next day." "Of course I did." Silence stretched between us. "I don't remember it that way," he finally said. "In my memory, I did it alone. Dad told me he'd helped me with the concept when he visited that weekend. He wasn't there. Anthony, he visited maybe twice a year, always when I was working." Another long pause. "I need to think about this, Mom." After we hung up, I sat on Bernadette's porch, watching the sunset. For the first time in decades, I felt something unfamiliar stirring in my chest. Hope. "Mrs. Washington, our investigation has uncovered significant irregularities." Mr. Daniels spread documents across his desk. "Your ex-husband's initial business success appears to be built on misappropriated funds and misrepresentation. 3 months had passed since I began gathering evidence. What started as personal vindication had evolved into something larger. Diana's investigation was gaining traction, though slowly. The insurance money was just the beginning," Mr. Daniels continued. "James Washington obtained his first major contracts through minority business enterprise programs designed for single parents from disadvantaged backgrounds." "But he wasn't raising the children," I said. "I was." "Exactly. He misrepresented his circumstances to qualify for these programs, which gave him a significant competitive advantage." Diana's preliminary reporting had caught the attention of a local business journal. No major publications yet, just a small community paper willing to run a story about fraud in minority business programs. "While many of the initial frauds have exceeded the statute of limitations," Mr. Daniels explained, "there appears to be an ongoing pattern of similar behavior in his current business practices, particularly over the last 7 years, which falls within actionable timeframes." Meanwhile, James had noticed the shifting winds. An envelope arrived at Bernadette's house, a settlement offer with a substantial check and confidentiality agreement. "He's trying to buy your silence," Bernadette observed as I stared at the check. More money than I'd ever seen. "Too late for that," I said, returning it uncashed. That evening, Marcus called, the first time since his birthday party. "Mother, Dad says you're causing problems. He wants us all to meet and discuss this like adults." "Interesting," I replied. "He didn't want to discuss things like an adult when he abandoned us 30 years ago." "That's your version," Marcus said. But his voice lacked its usual certainty. "Check your university records," I suggested. "Ask who really wrote the letters that secured your medical school scholarship. It wasn't your father's connections." After we hung up, Vanessa texted, "Mom, we need to talk. Found some old bank records. Call me." Anthony was more direct. He showed up at Bernadette's door one evening, looking exhausted. "I've been interviewing our old neighbors for my new book," he said as we sat on the porch. "Their memories don't match the story Dad told us, or the story I've been telling myself." He showed me his notes. Mrs. Jenkins remembering how I'd taken ironing to earn extra money for Anthony's writing camp. Mr. Rodriguez recalling how he'd drive me to work when my car broke down. "Why didn't you ever tell us Dad was lying?" Anthony asked. I thought carefully before answering. "Would you have believed me? Over the father who showed up with presents and took you to baseball games while I was working?" Anthony looked away. "Probably not." As he was leaving, he hesitated. "Mom, Dad's threatening to sue you for defamation. He says you're trying to destroy him." I smiled, feeling strangely calm. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation, Anthony. And I have 30 years of truth documented in those boxes. That night, I wrote in my journal about the strange power that comes from finally standing your ground, about how fear dissolves when you have nothing left to lose. "The empire James built is standing on a foundation of sand," I wrote, "and the tide is coming in." Local businessman accused of fraud in minority contract program. Diana's first article ran in a small community business journal, nestled between advertisements for accounting services and commercial real estate. Not exactly front-page news, but a start. "It might not seem like much," Diana said, "but journalists from bigger outlets read these specialized publications. It plants a seed." James's response was swift and predictable. "These allegations are nothing but the bitter fabrications of an ex-wife seeking attention." He seemed confident the story would die there, but over the next few weeks, something unexpected happened. A reporter from a regional business magazine called Diana interested in the minority contract angle. Then a blogger specializing in construction industry news picked it up. The prestigious Father of the Year award was quietly postponed for scheduling reasons. Business associates began asking uncomfortable questions. Anthony called daily now. "Mom, people are starting to talk. Dad's lawyer sent me a cease and desist letter because I told my publisher I'm revising my memoir. Are you okay?" I asked, more concerned about him than the growing media interest. "No," he admitted. "I built my career on a story that wasn't true. I don't know who I am without that narrative." Vanessa was more pragmatic. "The board is asking questions. I need to know exactly what evidence you have, Mom. I can't be blindsided." Only Marcus maintained his distance, though I heard from Anthony that he was privately investigating my claims. 6 months after I first started gathering evidence, a reporter from a national business publication contacted Diana, interested in doing a more in-depth story on James's business practices. Not about our family drama, but about the systematic exploitation of programs designed to help minority entrepreneurs. That same week, James showed up at Bernadette's house unannounced, flanked by 2 attorneys. "Mrs. Jenkins, we need to speak with Eleanor," one said when Bernadette answered the door. I was in the living room, working on my writing assignment. Hearing James's voice after all these months sent a jolt through me, but I stayed seated, hands folded calmly in my lap. "Eleanor." James entered, looking older than at the party. Stress had carved new lines around his mouth. "This has gone far enough. You're destroying everything I've built." "You mean everything we built," I corrected him. "My labor, my sacrifices, my children." His attorneys opened their briefcases, pulling out documents. "Mrs. Washington, our client is prepared to take legal action if these defamatory statements continue. Additionally, we have evidence contradicting your claims." I raised an eyebrow. "What evidence would that be?" "Letters from your children confirming Mr. Washington's ongoing presence in their lives, financial records showing his contributions." "Selective contributions," I noted, "made during strategic visits designed to undermine me." James stepped forward, voice low and threatening. "Eleanor, you need to retract these stories and sign this agreement. Otherwise I'll be forced to—" "To what, James?" I stood slowly, looking him directly in the eyes. "Sue me? Go ahead. Take everything I own." "Oh, wait. You already did that 30 years ago." His face darkened. "I made those children what they are today. You were just the woman who raised them?" I finished for him. "The woman who cleaned houses so they could go to college? The woman whose name you erased from their success stories? Mom?" We all turned. Anthony stood in the doorway, eyes moving from me to his father. "Anthony." James recovered quickly. "Good. Tell your mother to stop this crusade before she hurts everyone." My son looked at me, then back at his father. "Actually, Dad, I came to hear Mom's side of the story, the full version." James's face fell. In that moment, he looked old and uncertain, a man watching his carefully constructed narrative crumble. "You can sue me if you want, James," I said quietly, "but you can't sue the truth." As James and his lawyers gathered their papers, defeat in their postures, I felt no triumph, only a profound sense of peace, the kind that comes when you finally stop carrying a burden you've held for too long. "So after Daddy left, you really worked all those jobs by yourself?" Vanessa sat across from me at a small cafe 5 months after the first article was published. Her first real question about our past in decades. 2 regular jobs plus whatever extra work I could find, I confirmed. House cleaning on weekends, alterations at night. She stared into her coffee. I remember you being gone a lot. Dad said it was because you couldn't handle the pressure of raising us. I was gone because I was working to keep a roof over your heads and food on the table. A tear slipped down her cheek. I believed him. All those years, I believed him. Reconciliation came in different forms with each of my children, and none of it was easy or complete. Anthony was first, diving into research about gaslighting and family manipulation, helping Diana with additional information for her expanded investigation. I'm rewriting my book, Mom, he told me over dinner one night. The real story this time, but it's hard. I'm having to question everything I thought I knew about my childhood. Some days he'd call, angry about a newly uncovered lie. Other days, he'd be distant, struggling to reconcile his love for his father with the emerging truth. Vanessa fluctuated between tentative reconnection and defensive withdrawal. I just need time, she'd say, after canceling our plans at the last minute. This is a lot to process. Marcus was the most resistant, his pride making it difficult to admit he'd been manipulated, but evidence continued mounting as Diana's investigation expanded. The story had spread from business journals to mainstream media, revealing how James had systematically constructed his empire on false claims. The final straw came when Marcus discovered documents proving his father had misrepresented himself to secure a major hospital construction contract, the very hospital where Marcus now worked. He showed up at my office yesterday, Marcus told me during his first voluntary visit to Bernadette's house. Said I needed to choose sides. That's when I realized he's been making me choose sides my entire life. Progress with my children was imperfect and often painful. Some days brought difficult conversations about memories I remembered very differently than they did. Other days brought small breakthroughs. Vanessa asking about her childhood, Marcus acknowledging my contributions to his education, Anthony sharing drafts of his revised memoir. Will we ever be a normal family again? Anthony asked one evening. I don't think normal is the goal, I told him. Truth is messy. Healing isn't linear. The legal process moved at its own pace. Mr. Daniels was honest about the limitations. Many of these actions are beyond the statute of limitations, he explained. But the pattern of continuing fraud gives us leverage. James, facing increased scrutiny from business partners and potential legal consequences, made another settlement offer, this time without the confidentiality clause. He's trying to get ahead of a potential judgment, Mr. Daniels explained, and avoid a public trial that would further damage his reputation. Diana's story had expanded into a series for a regional newspaper, focusing less on our personal story and more on how James's case exemplified broader issues of fraud in minority business programs. I began speaking at community centers about financial literacy and recognizing manipulation, particularly to groups of single mothers. One evening, James made a final attempt at manipulation. He arrived at Bernadette's with a folder of property deeds. I'm prepared to transfer these properties to you, Eleanor, he said, looking defeated. In exchange, I need you to speak to the children. Tell them not to turn their backs on their father. I studied the man I'd once loved enough to trust with everything. The properties aren't the point, James. You stole more than money. You stole my place in my children's lives. I gave them advantages you couldn't, he insisted. No, you gave them a false narrative that made you the hero and me the footnote. That's not an advantage. That's a handicap. He left without another word, the deeds still on the table. Later, Anthony asked if I hated his father. Hate requires energy I don't have to spare, I told him. What your father did was wrong, but hating him won't restore what was taken. What will? Anthony asked. I thought about that question for a long time. Truth, I finally answered, and time. The Eleanor Washington Scholarship is awarded annually to single mothers pursuing higher education while supporting their families. I sat on the stage at Howard University, 18 months after my journey began, listening to the university president announce the scholarship created in my name. In the audience sat my 3 children, not reunited as a perfect family, but present, each finding their own path forward. Marcus had established a clinic in our old neighborhood. Providing affordable care to families like ours had once been. Vanessa had left her corporate job to start a foundation supporting women entrepreneurs. Anthony's revised memoir, telling our true family story, was scheduled for publication next spring. The scholarship was funded partially by my settlement with James. He'd ultimately chosen to avoid a public trial that would have exposed even more of his fraudulent business practices, and supplemented by donations inspired by Diana's series, which had won a regional journalism award. The coverage had never reached the massive media storm I'd initially feared and partially hoped for. Instead, it had spread through specialized channels where it mattered most: business journals, legal publications, academic circles studying economic justice. James hadn't been publicly destroyed, but his company had lost several key contracts and was now under new management, with James relegated to a minority stakeholder position. Bernadette sat beside me, squeezing my hand as the president invited me to speak. As I approached the podium, I saw a very different woman than the one who'd stood in front of her mirror before Marcus's graduation dinner 2 years earlier. That woman had been diminished by decades of erasure. This woman stood tall, her voice strong, her story finally her own. I never allowed circumstances to define who I was, I told the audience, even when those circumstances included betrayal, hardship, and invisibility. And it's never too late to reclaim your own story. After the ceremony, a young woman approached me, maybe 30, with a toddler on her hip and determination in her eyes. "Ms. Washington, your story changed my life," she said. "I'm working and studying while raising my son alone. Everyone tells me I can't do it." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw myself 30 years ago. "You absolutely can," I told her, "and don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Later, as Bernadette drove me to my new apartment, a comfortable place near the community center where I now taught writing workshops, I thought about what victory really means. I hadn't won by exposing James completely. His company still existed, though diminished and under new management. He lived in relative anonymity now, his reputation tarnished, but his life intact. I hadn't won by regaining my children's complete trust and understanding. That remained a work in progress, with good days and difficult ones. Marcus still struggled with pride, often canceling our meetings last minute. Vanessa vacillated between warmth and distance. Even Anthony, the most reconciled, had moments of doubt and confusion about his childhood memories. My victory was simpler and more profound. I had reclaimed my voice, my place in my own story. In my new living room hung a photograph, not the perfect family portrait I once dreamed of, but something more truthful. Me, surrounded by other women from my writing group, each of us holding manuscripts containing our stories. "You changed things, Eleanor," Bernadette said as we settled in with tea. "Not just for yourself." I nodded, thinking of the young mother I'd met today, of Diana's legislation initiatives to protect elders from financial abuse, of the letters I received weekly from women inspired to examine their own histories. "The truth may not set you free," I said, "but it sure makes for better company than lies." Outside my window, Chicago continued its evening rhythm. Inside, for the first time in decades, I was exactly where I belonged, visible, valued, and finally the author of my own life. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and share your story in the comments. Your journey might inspire another queen.